Hello and welcome to The Big Show, part of the Field of 12 Media Network. This is Season 1, Episode 1, presented by our partners at Bet Rivers SportsBook. I am Joshua Perry, former Ohio State linebacker, national champion, and captain. I am joined by my guy, Penn State Nittany Lion quarterback, Christian Hackenberg. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing well, brother. Really excited about doing this with you. This is going to be a lot of fun. I think we're going to be able to provide a lot of good insight for these people and these listeners, and it's going to be good. So,
yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, we both come from some real football backgrounds. First off, I think the Big Ten Conference has some of the best football, top to bottom, fundamentals, everything you want to see, smash mouth, spread it out, doesn't matter. We can do it well. And you've got a couple of people who I would say were pretty good college players, spent a little bit of time in the league. Now you're coaching high school football. That's correct. So we've got the analysis on lock. I think it's going to be a really fun show. And what you can expect out of us is we're going to bring you some of the analysis, some of the breakdown, but we're also going to get you some of the storylines and our thoughts and opinions from our perspective as former players, but also now we have a little bit of a different point of view and a different lens. So what do you say? You want to jump right into it?
Let's do it, man.
All right, so segment number one, we got conference realignment, and it's obviously been the story in college football over the past couple of weeks. You got Texas and Oklahoma that are leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. This is going to be like the first super conference in college athletics. I know a lot of people are excited about it, but it's got some repercussions. So I'll start with asking you the question first off. What do you think the overall impact is for Texas and Oklahoma? And then the second follow-up question is, what the hell happens to the Big 12 now?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think it's earth-shattering. You look at the direction and all the money that goes into these conferences and the background in terms of, like I was saying, contracts, money, and all those things. So that's a driver that I think a lot of people don't pay a ton of attention to, but it's there. And personally, I always look at it. There's a handful of schools around the country where if they're good every year, it's good for college football. And the SEC seems to be picking a lot of those guys off and bringing them down. Texas and Oklahoma, I think, are two perennial powerhouses throughout the history of college football. And for them to make that jump, it says a lot about the direction that I think they want college football to go. I think everybody else is going to have to fall in line. It's gonna make for a really, really interesting 4 years, in my opinion. I think they said they weren't slated to join until officially 2025, unless something happens with the Big 12. But I think there's a lot, and I think there's going to have to be a lot of brainstorming in terms of what's next. How are we going to do this? How are we going to structure this with the college football playoff and all these things? So it really has a lot of different points to it and a lot of different problems that need to be solved. So we'll see. So I think it's huge though. Moral of the story is massive.
No, I mean, it's a big deal. And as I kind of compartmentalize, like, what becomes really unique to me is Texas and Oklahoma are obviously, like you said, powerhouses, and they ran the Big 12, and it gave Oklahoma basically an opportunity to get into a 14 playoff just about every single year. Whether or not they were going to win when they got there is a different conversation.
Yep.
Now it's almost like they're conceding to the fact that they would rather go somewhere where they can do a more explosive TV contract than to kind of be the king of the conference. I think Oklahoma is going to have a shot. But as I look at Texas, they've been down for a few years, and now you got to compete with the likes of Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Florida, Auburn, year in and year out. And I think it's almost like a signal from Texas that, yes, we are a big brand. Yes, we are historic. But right now we need to hitch ourselves to somebody else's coattails to really be that team. And then you start to talk about the rest of the Big 12. You just throw them all in the trash. That's a bad situation. Like, I don't know what you're going to do with some of those teams. I think some of them probably end up taking a step back into a lesser conference. Other ones might be a little bit more desirable out west. We don't know. But it comes full circle to our conference in the Big Ten. And I'll throw out my thought on Big Ten potential expansion. Then I want to get what yours is. But I don't think the Big Ten actually needs to go full on conference expansion. When you look at the positioning with the TV money right now, and the relationship that the conference has with some of the TV networks, the schools are making money hand over fist. And obviously, if you add more schools, you could probably get a bigger pie, but you're going to have to cut that pie more ways. And so at what point does it stop being a benefit? There's also this concept of when you expand the conference, now you have to deal with non-revenue sports and how you travel those athletes, et cetera. And that cuts into budgets. My solution is to channel all of the historic energy of the Rose Bowl and create the scheduling pact with the Pac-12 where you're not joining conferences, there's no merger, but every year you're committed to matchups like Ohio State, Oregon, and like a Penn State USC, which we saw in a phenomenal football game. You get a Michigan Stanford type matchup. Like these are the things I think college football fans would be thirsty for. It plays well with the TV networks. It keeps your bottom line intact because you're not traveling the swim team. And it keeps you kind of on that precipice of relevancy for the Ohio States, the Penn States, the USCs, the Oregons. With now super conferences coming around, you can kind of throw your weight around that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a ton of sense. And to your point, just the history of the Pac-12 and the Big Ten throughout the years, specifically in the Rose Bowl, has definitely ran deep and has put some really good product out there on the field. But, I'm going to kind of come at it from a different angle, and I think it's going to be a longer play. And similar to what you're saying about TV and money and all those things that are in the background, I think ultimately the FBS needs to figure out how they're going to do it. And I think taking a book out of the NFL's playbook, taking a page out of the NFL's playbook, and just going a north and a south, two supersized conferences that have several subdivisions regionally based. For your example, with the non-revenue generating sports, you create certain conferences and what makes sense. I think having a Notre Dame and a Big Ten would be awesome. I think it would be great for Notre Dame. And I think it would be great for the Big Ten. I think there's several examples of that. But I did some math. I was sitting here doing this when we had this. So if the FBS cut down to 120 teams, North and South, 6 subdivisions in each, that'd be 9 regular season games in your conference. And then you could have 5 to 6 playoff games based on keeping a 24-team playoff format. So my biggest thing with all this is how you're going to figure out who's going to be the real national champion, how you're going to let these kids play it out and kind of preserve the feel of college football without it being super over publicized and having these kids play 18, 19, 20 game schedules. And I think that's a way where you can have these guys play 14 to 15, 16 games a year, keep the wear and tear down on them, but also, kind of give the fans what they want. And they want to see who is the best and give people chances to do that.
Let me jump in because there's this prevailing thought from a lot of people around the Big Ten that the Champions Week that they did last year during the pandemic was something that people would like to see return. So what if in your system, it's not necessarily a playoff for maybe some of the lower level teams, like some of the teams that are below 500 or whatever the case is, but they still get kind of like a Champions Week type situation where they're getting these different matchups. And that's not even the bowl game. Like you can still send them off to do whatever. But just, I think the heart of what you're trying to get at and the thing that I love and what we're really getting to and what people want to see is how do we create the most intriguing matchups? Like anytime you talk to people who are in football media on the television side, they'll tell you the reason why Ohio State and Michigan or Ohio State and Penn State are always big games is because it doesn't matter how good the teams are. It's because they are schools that are recognizable and they draw eyeballs for a TV production.
Correct.
And so if you can get some teams on some different stages doing something like that, I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it would be awesome. And I mean, unfortunately, I think you're going to have to eliminate those money generators in terms of non-conference games. And when you're playing the Buffaloes and the West Points and the, Appalachian States and Akrons, right? Those schools are going to suffer a little bit. But like I said, I mean, this move kind of shows, and to your point, that like money is driving a lot of this.
Yep.
So that's capitalism right there, brother. You gotta,
Yeah.
you gotta trim some fat.
Hey, eat or be eaten, right? I mean, you got to make some moves.
So that's the way it is. And, to kind of create something for them too, I think would be interesting to see how, those FCS and those sub, bowl championship teams, can create a competitive thing, and whether it be bowl games or even another, you know, subdivision national champion, whatever you want to call it, something like that. But
Right.
I think it's going to, overall, I think the whole process is going to include a lot of brainstorming and a lot of people coming together and trying to figure out the best solution. My biggest hope is that it's not all about the dollar signs, and it is, to your point, about preserving what college football is about and getting those marquee matchups and giving people great content while also not ripping apart some of those long storied traditions. I mean, could you imagine not being able to play Michigan every year? Like,
It'd be a bad deal.
that would just be insane.
Yeah.
And it's really hard when you have teams like that start, and schools like that start ripping some of those traditions apart because of money. I really just hope that ultimately, those types of things can get handled and people can figure that out.
And I think there's probably a vested interest for the decision makers to ensure that some of these historic matchups, if they're already gone, they come back, or if they're currently in existence, they maintain. So that'll be something to watch. I mean, there's a little bit more drama with it. We got to keep the show moving on, but definitely be something we're probably unpacking for, at least a couple more years.
Before we get into Quinn Ewers and him going to Ohio State and leaving high school early, let me tell you about our sponsors over at BetRivers Sportsbooks. If you haven't signed up yet, BetRivers is offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart from everyone else is that they require just one play through to turn that bonus into cash money. With their new Pay Rush instant approval, withdrawals are not only fast, but they're safe, secure, and reliable. Go to betrivers.com today or download the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Segment 2, we got Quinn Ewers, and I think this will be a good one just to kind of hear your perspective as a former quarterback. But he upsets the apple cart a little bit. 5-star recruit out of the state of Texas. He was seen by many recruiting services as the second best QB prospect ever rated besides Vince Young. Commits to Ohio State. During his senior year, has the opportunity to do some brand endorsement, brand ambassador type stuff with name, image, and likeness. And the Texas high school football governing body said, no, you can't do that as a high school athlete. And so he said, all right, well, I only got one class left. I'm going to take my little English class and I'm going to head up to Columbus. So he would be entering his senior season this year, decides that he's going to reclassify, enroll at Ohio State. And now this kind of recruiting world, this high school football world, this college football world is all upside down.
Yeah. So first off, Quinn Ewers is one of the kids. I try not to pay a ton of attention to recruiting. Goes back a long ways with my parents and my high school coach, and just in terms of how I approach the process. But I did get a chance to watch this kid a few times, and I think he's really, really special. And I've said this to a lot of people. When he gets to Ohio State, it's going to be a problem for that conference for 3 years. And I think he's a generational type player. I think he is. But moving forward with that, I think with the whole NIL and how all this thing is kind of played out, and I think a lot of decisions were made without really thinking through, I'm completely for it. I think these players should have that ability, personally. But to your point, I don't think anybody foresaw this being an issue. And when this actually becomes an issue and somebody makes a decision like this, now you're kind of peeling back the layers of this onion, and there's hurdles that people have to jump over. So I think personally for him, I don't know the kid personally. I know a few people who work with him and who have said nothing but great things about the kid. But he, I don't think this is a money thing. I think it was just the fact that he felt like he had the right to do some of these things. And when the Texas high school organization or whatever it is that runs the high school sports there didn't allow him to do that and set those things in place. I think he made a decision that he felt was best for him and his family. So,
Yeah.
tip my hat. But the bigger conversation to what you hinted at is now what's next? What are we going to see with the next number one kid coming out in the next?
Right.
And then as that follows and it goes down the line, there's a lot of things that need to be figured out and hashed out. So, Quinn Ewers really, to your point, upsetting the apple cart specifically at Ohio State, because I think they have a ton of talent in that room, but also he kind of upset the apple cart for recruiting moving forward now, and what this means for schools in terms of how they approach handling top level prospects.
Yeah, and one of the things that you said, I think, is really, it's a good point, and it bears repeating, is Ewers didn't make this decision based off of the financials alone. Like, from everything that I've heard, he comes from a background where he doesn't need to go out there and make money. He's not sending the money back home for his family. He's comfortable. It was for him, a moral stand on what he believed was right and wrong and what he should be able to do versus what he shouldn't. I always respect the kid for doing that. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of a guy totally reclassifying out of his senior year to come to college. But what I am a fan of is people taking their future into their own hands and deciding whatever's best for them, and that's what they're going to do. I've got no problem with that. But now we do have a little bit of a question of, if you're Ohio High School Athletic Association, or if you're the Texas governing body, or California, or whoever, because, for example, California says, well, high school kids, you can go out there and you can make money. Texas says no. Ohio's still trying to figure out. They're reconsidering now after watching Quinn Ewers leave his home state and come to the great state of Ohio. That's where the layers start to come in, because the states are all operating off of different rules, which is wild. But now, if you are, and a lot of these Texas lawmakers are big Longhorns fans, if you're one of those people, you felt like Steve Sarkisian year one, if he would have had a good year, you probably had a chance in flipping Quinn Ewers to stay home.
He was originally in Texas, was he not?
Yes, he was. And there was some momentum feeling like they could get him back. And by having that rule, you basically didn't even give yourself the chance.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people are going to be really upset about that. So that's that part of the conversation. I'm really curious to see now how this trickles down, not just from the college level, but to the high school level. But here's what we got. And I need to hear the quarterback's perspective on this, because I look at Ohio State's quarterback room. You got CJ Stroud, who people think is going to be the starter this year, former 5-star guy. You've got Jack Miller, who's a former 4-star. He's from Arizona. Kyle McCord is a former 5-star, came in from the state of Pennsylvania. And then you've got Quinn Ewers, who's enrolling right now, 5-star. All these guys have freshman eligibility. None of them have thrown a pass in a college football game. There's some real issues in terms of development for Ohio State staff and trying to keep all those guys engaged. But now you have a roster management issue too, where you have to make sure that you can keep at least 2 of the 4 guys on campus for a couple of years, just to make sure you have a succession plan. If you're a quarterback in that room and you're seeing all of the stars that are in there, you're seeing what kind of competition it is, how do you think this type of thing pans out, where you've got Stroud and Miller, who've been in the program for a couple of years now, but they got freshman eligibility, Kyle McCord, true freshman? Like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely tough. And fortunately for a lot of these kids now, in the way that college athletics is going, which I am personally not a big fan of, I think the ability for kids, I mean, I see it from both sides, which is hard, but the ability for kids to just up and leave and then go somewhere else and immediately go, like, good for them. But me being, again, the way I was brought up, you pick a decision and you make it, you stick with it, and you deal with the lumps. And I live that. So I don't have to really talk about that much, but it's, for me, I think that it breeds, hopefully, if Ohio State can do it, and I think Ohio State has been one of the programs who has been able to do it historically. I think Alabama's another one, where they are bringing kids in, and that competition is breeding really, really good products. And a lot of these kids understand the succession line, and it's my turn. And if I just pay my dues and I do this, right? So I think out of all the programs in the Big Ten, I think Ohio State is one of them that can get away with this, just because of what they've done consistently over and over again, right? But to your point, there will be one of those kids that one or two of those kids are going to go leave and try to go play.
There's a chance 3 of them could, and that's, I mean, worst case scenario, but I mean, it's crowded.
I completely agree with you. And just that ability for kids to leave has, I think, created a thought process with a lot of these coaches in terms of spreading these things out in succession lines. Not taking a quarterback every year, trying to take a quarterback every 2 or 3 years, even.
Right.
They've been thinking about that now for the past few years. But, with this room, like I said, I mean, and you said, a lot of these kids have a lot of things. But as I've said before, I personally believe Ewers is unbelievably talented. And I know Ryan Day. He was in San Fran when I was coming out. I met with the guy a few times. Love his mind. Obviously, what he's done over and over again up there for the past, 4 years? Mm-hmm. It speaks for itself. So I think if anybody can handle it, he can handle it. But I think for Quinn personally coming in, I did the same thing. I didn't early enroll. I came in the summer. So, I mean, I was even on campus a couple years before him. Or a couple months before him. But that's a tough adjustment. You get thrown into the fire, and if you're not in an environment where you can necessarily get given a ton of reps, being able to catch up to the speed of things and then adjust to the system and what you're being asked to do can be a little bit difficult. So he's definitely going to be behind the 8 ball, and I hope his talent can make up for it personally. But I think for the time being, there's got to be a really good plan specifically with him in terms of how they're going to be able to keep him there and give him the reps that he needs and figure all that out. And it's going to be ultimately up to Coach Day.
Okay, so let's talk about that though, because you're a guy who's coaching quarterbacks right now. You were a guy who played quarterback at an extremely high level, started as a true freshman. What is the best plan to have in place when you have a young quarterback that's brand new to get him game ready?
Yeah, well, I mean, realistically, this kid should be playing high school football this year.
Right.
Realistically speaking. So, to give him an opportunity to redshirt and not have to rush, I think it would be wise for Quinn to listen to it. And I think that would be a big thing for the Ohio State staff to push on him. Let him get comfortable. As we've seen, for the most part, Ohio State finds themselves in situations where they can get guys reps. They're up big. They're giving these second and third team guys opportunities to get some tape out there, get their feet.
Well, and now you can play in 4 games and still redshirt too.
Correct. So I think it's one of those situations where if the kid comes on and does what I think he's capable of doing, you're going to feel the pressure to play him. But to your point, he can get some reps. He missed spring ball, but he can get some reps this fall, and you can still redshirt him and then really let them go at it next year. Like I said, I don't think for Ohio State, whoever they roll out there is going to be successful. And that's been time proven in terms of the last 10 years, really rolling back there. I mean, but making sure that it's the most conducive situation. And I think it's really I think it's a 2-year plan. I think it's setting up for next offseason. And then you're going to find your guy. You're going to find your guy who's going to run it for 3 years and do what they need to do. And then let everything fall in line the way it needs to fall in line. But that's my opinion. And I really do think that it would be the best thing for him to redshirt and just take it slow, feed him reps, dirty show scrimmages, whatever it may be, but just get him acclimated and let him go. And if he ends up being the best guy, let him play.
Right.
But,
right.
With everything that's stacked against him and having been in that situation, he's going to have to mature very, 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 very fast. And it's the coach's job not to put him in a situation where he's going to fail.
I agree. And there's no way in my mind too, if you're Quinn Ewers, like you could have made the decision to forego your senior year and believe that you were going to be the starting quarterback year 1. So that redshirt conversation, I think, is exactly what it needs to be. I think in Columbus, that's probably where the staff wants it to be too. Just so they can get a little bit more distance between the guys and they can be on a little bit more of a developmental plan. I'll ask you this before we get to our final segment, but Kyle McCord, 5-star guy from Pennsylvania. Let's say CJ Stroud gets the job like most people think he's going to. how quickly is James Franklin, his staff, reaching out to Kyle's high school coach to see where he's at? Because you got was my boy Clifford over there.
Yep.
And he's been fine, but he's going to be on his way out. Like, you need that generational guy probably at quarterback to come in, get a 5-star who was once in state, transferred from Ohio State, and see what happens there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it should be an option. I think just seeing what has transpired at Penn State the last few years. You had Levis leave, he got some reps. He was kind of up and down. Clifford was a little up and down last year. There's been a lot of change over there. And for a guy who went through, a system change in college, and then has been through quite a few system changes. That is tough, and consistency from that usually breeds consistency in play, especially at the quarterback position.
For sure.
So I think for Coach Franklin and the guys up there, to your point, finding the answer after Clifford is going to be the biggest question. And I know that they have the one kid from Ohio, Alar, coming in, Drew.
Yeah.
And I've heard great things about him. Haven't been able to watch a lot of his stuff, but have heard a lot of good things. So to your point, though, getting somebody like McCord in there, he was a St. Joe's prep kid.
Yep.
Right outside of Philly. Ironically, down here in South Jersey, you hear a lot of people talking about that because it's so close. And there was a lot of people that said a lot of good things about him in the high school coaching world.
Yeah.
So, I think it's definitely something they should pursue. And they've missed out on some big guys in the past, with Fields and Wimbush and
the
guys right after me. So I think it'd be good to get somebody like that in there, specifically at that position, because I think that's been the biggest missing piece.
Yeah.
Has been that guy at that position, basically after myself and Trace left, and just making it consistent. Clifford's been great. I love Cliff.
Right.
He battled through everything, and
he's gutsy, man.
Really well. He's gutsy as heck, but really, really planning for a guy that can be there for 3 years and be consistent and be a rock, I think is big.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, you've had the running back room on lock. The running backs don't do well without a really good offensive line. You've had some phenomenal receivers who could change the game. And the defense has always been pretty good. It's about that 5-star guy that you can get in there that can really just take over the game, close out a drive, whatever you need. So that'll be something interesting to watch. We'll get into our thoughts on the upcoming Big Ten season in a second, but I just wanted to let you guys know about the Field of 12, a brand new podcast and digital media network covering college football by the people that know it best. Brought to you by Shoot Your Shot Productions, the folks behind Field of 68. Field of 12 gives you insight into the game we all love by the people who have lived it. Trevor Knight and Bryce Petty are covering the Big 12. And of course, we'll continue to be your go-to source on everything Big Ten. Check the links below and find the rest of our shows. The Field of 12, where college football happens. Let's get us to our final segment. We're going to do a little kind of preview, some initial power rankings of the Big Ten teams. It's going to be a fun one. We'll revisit these power rankings during the season, kind of get people some of our thoughts on these teams. But we got our little preseason deal here. And I'll start it off in the East. I'll give you mine. I think it's a pretty simple list, starting with number 1, Ohio State, duh. Number 2, Penn State, and number 3, Indiana. And there's a lot of conversation between people, can Indiana be that second best team in the East behind Ohio State? Can they kind of leapfrog and jump over Penn State? And as much as I respect them, I'm not exactly sure it's their time. I think they kind of settle in that 3 slot. Number 4, I've got Michigan, which is a shame that I'm putting Indiana before Michigan, but that's just the state of that program right now. Number 5 is Rutgers. Greg Schiano, I think, is doing a phenomenal job. I like the makeup of his team. I think they got great culture. 6, I'm going Maryland, and 7, I'm going Michigan State, which is wild. I put them in the basement, but I just don't think they've had enough time with Mel Tucker yet, and they got some real issues at some certain positions. They hadn't recruited very well before Mel got there those last couple of years under D'Antonio, so it's tough.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in experience driving a lot of things. Again, there's certain programs that can get away with it. just due to the level of talent they have coming in there. But traditionally, and I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but you look at the Big Ten and you look at when teams like Iowa and Northwestern are good, it's usually that third or even fourth year, redshirt year, sometimes that second year when they have those guys in the program and they bought in and have a lot of older guys and a great culture established. For me, you look at it, Rutgers is ranked number 11 with 92% returning production. And I think Shiano's done a fantastic job recruiting, going back to his roots, trying to keep kids in Jersey from Jersey. And he's done.
Well, he went to the portal too and did phenomenal there.
Yep. So, to your point, I kind of stuck with my top three, Ohio State, Penn State. I haven't been 1000% sold on Indiana yet. I have Michigan there just because of what they do and how they do things.
What's your question on Indiana?
I don't have a question. I just want to see it consistent.
Okay.
That's
fair.
Is again, consistency. And when you look at it, Michigan is going to get those kids up there. They're going to get kids up there where you roll them out there and they're going to be better than most people.
Sure.
They don't necessarily have to be in a great scheme. They don't necessarily have to be anything, but when you just roll the kids out there and let them play, they have the athletes up there. And I do like the quarterback they have, the Cade
McNamara. Yeah. Well, and they got JJ McCarthy too, who everybody was excited about in recruiting. I don't know if you watched his tape at all, but he's kind of impressive.
Yeah. So I did see he's the kid that did like the jump 360 throw.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw some of that
So
stuff.
you ever try that one out in a game?
Not if I ever wanted to get back out on the field. So for me, I think Michigan still just traditionally has that spot. But to your point, I think Indiana proved a lot last year. I think the direction of that program is going to be good. And for me, I think, especially in the East, having that Indiana, Rutgers, somebody else step up and start consistently putting a really good product on the field is going to be good for that side of the conference. And I think Indiana's closer than Rutgers, but I think Indiana and then Rutgers are kind of the two dark horses for me that can make some noise. And if Indiana goes out there and plays to their potential, I think, again, I think that 3-2 spots interchangeable. I think it's Ohio State, everybody else. Let's see what happens. And kind of, you got to show me. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Talking about Indiana improving it and showing it again. And at Big Ten Media Days, we were able to talk to Indiana's head coach, Tom Allen, just about his process. And he said the easiest part, or I guess the easier part, is getting your team up to the point where they are right now, where folks are talking about them. The harder part is that consistency and that longevity. And what makes it even harder, which I've learned from personal experience on a team that won a national championship, I think, with lesser talent than the team that came back and didn't, is when you got returning All-Americans and returning all Big Ten players and you've got player of the year type guys, it becomes a little bit harder to manage the locker room. And I think Tom Allen's going to have to deal with some of that. He's got a couple All-Americans coming back on defense, and he's got probably the best quarterback returning in the Big Ten right now. And he's got Ty Freifogel, who lit up Ohio State for 3 touchdowns a year ago and had just a phenomenal year. Like, it's going to be a challenge for them just in terms of making sure they can keep everybody together. Looking at the West, I'll let you go first with kind of your power rankings there.
Yeah. So again, I kind of kept it top 3. And I kind of noted, like, I think going back and looking at Northwestern, I really like their quarterback situation. I love the Helinski kid coming from South Carolina. I was a huge fan of him. And then the kid that they have there now that has been I think he played a little bit last year. He was also a transfer, I believe, from Clemson. I like their situation there. I'm a big believer in that. But I think it's Wisconsin. I love Minnesota. I am a big Minnesota fan. I love PJ Fleck.
Sure.
I think his brand of ball is great for that school and that area. And I think he's done a lot of really good things over the 3 or 4 years that he's been there now. And then really that 3 spot for me is up for grabs. I mean, you got Iowa. They're again cyclical, but I do believe in Kirk Ferentz. I think very highly of him as a coach.
Me too.
And I think he's a great man, a great leader, and he always figures out a way. He puts the kids in the best situation to be successful, and he figures out a way to be competitive. But after that, I mean, again, same thing. It's kind of up there. I'd love for Nebraska to get back and get back to where they should be.
Yeah.
But it just hasn't quite worked out, I think, the way that everyone wanted it to. But we'll see what happens. And you can sit here and we can have this argument, but at the end of the day, no one knows until the lights come on, until the pads get to cracking. So but I do think that the one thing that you could be consistent with is I think Wisconsin's going to be the team to beat in the West. And then I think Minnesota is going to be the secondary, kind of handle everything else, and then whoever rises after that's going to be who it is.
Okay, so it's really interesting you talking about Minnesota there, because the Cleveland.com does this unofficial preseason poll of Big Ten teams, and the media had them as the fourth best team in the Big Ten Conference on the west side of the Big Ten Conference. And I thought that they were just way off. And I don't have them as the number 2 team in the West right now, but it wouldn't shock me at all if they were the number 2 team or the winners of the West. When you look at what they return offensively, 5 starters that have played a ton of games on the offensive line. They've got Chris Ottman-Bell, who is now poised to be their number 1 receiver. Tanner Morgan, who I thought was the second best quarterback in the Big Ten in 2019. Mohamed Ibrahim, who is the returning Big Ten running back of the year. And then a defense that got their ass beat last year that was playing nothing but a bunch of guys who had never played in college before. And now they've got 10 of those guys returning. I think it puts them in a %
of their production returning, which is impressive.
It's phenomenal. And they're a veteran team. They got some guys out of the portal. I think it puts them in a really good position. Now, with that being said, I love Wisconsin. I think Graham Mertz is a very good player. He showed some weaknesses last year, but he was young and it was a disjointed season. I think that he's going to be really good. They've got probably more skill offensively right now than they've ever had. So they'll be able to do some creative things. The defense is going to be great. Iowa's my number 2 simply because Kirk Ferentz, really solid defense and a quarterback that's returning. I think they're going to play themselves into a pretty good year. Then for me, it's Minnesota in that 3 spot, Northwestern number 4, Illinois number 5, and I want to talk about them in a sec. Purdue number 6, Nebraska number 7. It's going to be a tough one for Scott Frost again. I'm just not exactly sure if they've got it figured out. But Illinois is a team for me that you give them 2 or 3 years, and Brett Bielema is going to have them as a legit contender over there in the West Division of the Big Ten. He's as organized of a coach as I've seen. He is very direct with his players. They've bought into what he's trying to sell them. That program is going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I kind of, to your point, I kind of liken them to a Rutgers in the East in terms of where they are in their development. But to your point, having a guy like Brett and having a guy like Greg at the helm, 2 guys who've done it before in terms of building a team and being a perennial powerhouse, being a perennial top 25 team. They know what it takes. So I think it'll be very, very interesting to see in 3 years where both of those programs are and what type of consistency is put out on the field in terms of a product.
Right. And it's not like either one of us are saying that they're going to win the Big Ten. But what we're saying is you're going to probably end up with one of those seasons like Indiana just had, where maybe we're talking about a New Year's Six type bowl game for an Illinois, which hasn't played in one, I don't think, since like they played in that Rose Bowl in 2007, right?
Yeah. I mean, Jude.
So, well, they got my boys in Columbus, man. I'm still upset about that game. I won't forget it. So this was a fun show, though. What do you think? We should do this again, shouldn't we?
Yeah. I mean, they're going to get it whether they like it or not. So here we are.
There we go. This was the Big Show, part of the Field of 12 Media Network, presented by our partners at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. I'm Joshua Perry. That's Christian Hackenberg. We'll catch you next time.